saw this one Twitter post the other day about someone who said that they've been using KAST for like 6 months now, and then their bank called them and said, hey, like, what's the problem? Why are you not using us anymore? If they live like a global first life, then yes, I think we would become a better alternative to their current bank or financial institution. Crypto at its heart was meant to be fair and open for anyone, and we're trying to build that in an experience for people that they can use every day in their lives.
Raagulan Pathy was born in Sri Lanka and moved to Australia as a child, fleeing civil war. He climbed the ranks in tech, leading Asia-Pacific operations at Zoom, Facebook, AWS, and Circle. But he walked away from it all to build KAST, a stablecoin-powered neobank, helping people in 150-plus countries access global finance. Raagulan is truly on a mission to make banking borderless.
My advice to young people is that you have to go and explore the world, because the opportunities are only as big as the place in which you're living.
Hello and welcome to Build It Up, where AI meets crypto, technology meets humanity, and East meets West. I'm Bill Chen. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation. My guest this week is Raagulan Pathy, co-founder of KAST. Raagulan is a seasoned technology executive, entrepreneur, and investor, but he prefers to call himself the stablecoin guy. His career spanned fintech, enterprise software, and digital transformation. Raagulan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
Let's get started. So could you introduce a little bit about what does KAST stand for, and how do you introduce to a normal user in 15 seconds?
So KAST is effectively like a neobank, or like a bank that you would normally use. But as opposed to holding cash, we hold stablecoins. But for a user, you still have a cash account, a savings account where you can earn interest, and a card where you could spend your money at anywhere there as a Visa or MasterCard. So it feels exactly the same. The only difference is because we hold stablecoins instead of cash, we can serve people in 150 plus countries.
So sounds like to serve the underserved population in the fintech is your priority?
I would say underserved is the right word. Because it's not necessarily the long tail unbanked, which a lot of people talk about, but there's a lot of people who are underserved because they don't have access to banking, because they have the wrong passport, or they don't live in the right country. There's a lot of demand in the world for dollar banking in particular.
Yeah.
I would say there's billions of people who want dollar banking, but only maybe less than a billion people who have access to dollar banking. And so we're trying to bridge that gap.
What is your background, and how does it help you to get into this vision and journey?
Yeah, so before KAST, I ran Circle's Asia business for about 2.5+ years. Circle, as many would know, is the issuer of USDC.
Yeah.
And so I've been in stablecoins for 4+ years now. Prior to that, I had a career in Web2 companies such as like Amazon and Facebook and Zoom and other places as well. So have a pretty strong background in tech, and then obviously crypto and stablecoins now as well.
You work with the Circle and USDC. How do you compare the USDT with USDC? And how do you see their landscape in the next few years? Sounds like one is pirate, one is navy.
Yeah, I think before it used to be a bit clearer. So essentially, USDT was really more for emerging markets and a lot more for trading. In fact, even today, if you look at the trading volume for USDT, I think it's more than 10 times USDC.
You mean the crypto trading?
Crypto,
Okay,
crypto
not
trading.
merchant trading.
Not merchant trading, although they're strong there as well, because they're also very, very strong in emerging markets, right? And then USDC traditionally has been used more in DeFi, and I would say been used more in Western markets, in particular places like the US and now Europe as well, right? And so it was kind of a bit of a clean break. But in recent times, USDC has made a little bit of a comeback and has grown quite well. And I think is starting to get a little bit better with trading, and even a little bit better in emerging markets. They've had deals with companies like Binance, which, on their payments side of Binance as well. And so I think they're starting to creep into other areas as well. But still, USDT is very, very strong in emerging markets. I think it's still the undisputed king of emerging markets.
So on top of that, I wonder, you also from a very institutional background, what do you see the relationship between stablecoin and the traditional, banking ecosystem, including the SWIFT? do you think it's going to be a replacement relationship or is it going to be a integration relationship in the future?
It's a good question. What I see is that there's always been 2 or 3 different markets for dollars. Most people don't understand this. There's effectively like the onshore dollar market. There is the global market for dollars, which is on SWIFT. But there's a third market as well. And the third market is what many may call like the Havala market or the informal dollar market. And this has been active for a very long time, 100 years plus, right?
Yeah.
And I think what stablecoins do is they are able to join all these 3 markets in a single layer, right? And so I think less of it as being a replacement for SWIFT than a unification of all these layers, right, into a single layer. I think it will run parallel to SWIFT and local dollars and each of these 3 markets, and over time will become bigger than them as well. So I think they're going to be an alternate. I don't think they're going to. Yes, they will. Like for example, on our platform, you can send money via SWIFT, and then we'll switch it to stablecoins.
Yeah.
And so they'll integrate in that way.
Yeah. So you're
but I
a
don't
bridge.
think. Yeah, we're kind of a bridge. Yeah, effectively. But I don't think you'll get to a point where. Maybe SWIFT will have its own stablecoin or something similar, but I think it's more likely like USDC and USDT and other players will lead the way still.
I think in 2024, from the data, the transaction volume of the stablecoin has been bigger than Visa alone. But as compared to the SWIFT volume, which is still very tiny, right?
Yeah.
And some people might argue, going forward, maybe the correspondent bank like JP Morgan and the BOA, they might issue their stablecoin, and that stablecoin is going to be, huge and massive. That one also echo your one of your assumptions. Maybe in the future, some SWIFT backer might issue their stablecoin. What is your view on that?
So one of the things that people I think don't comprehend well is that stablecoins in themselves, the biggest feature of stablecoins is that they're largely permissionless, right?
Permissionless.
Yeah. Most people will look at the technology that they're on the blockchain and they look at all these things and they're all true. But one of the problems I think that banks have is being truly permissionless just because of the amount of regulation that they're wrapped around. Right? And they've just got historical banking regulation, payments regulation. If you're someone like, JP Morgan or one of these bigger banks, they have all that regulation, but in 50 or 100 different countries, right?
Yeah.
So they have mountains and mountains of regulatory issues to overcome. And so I think issuing a stablecoin, though the issuing of the stablecoin is easy, the magic of sending it anywhere for a bank is very hard.
Yeah.
And I think that is why I think the big stablecoin issuers will continue to be the most successful.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like you think it is very easy for the correspondent bank to issue a stablecoin, but that stablecoin is against their traditional regime, which is permission-based, not permissionless, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you will see even companies that are not a bank, like even companies like PayPal, right? They've issued PYUSD. Now, if you go to the PayPal platform, which is a global platform, has 400 million plus users, they still only allow you to pay out mostly in the US and Canada, right? So even a company like PayPal, which spent 5 years launching a stablecoin, struggles to make it available to nearly anyone in the world. It's still largely US and Canada. And so I just think like if they struggle, imagine how hard it will be for a bank. Right?
Makes sense.
Now the regulation might get better and looser and that may happen, but I think by the time it gets truly loosened, it might be 5-10 years, and by which time the other stablecoins would be very, very big.
Okay. So it sounds like very sad to the traditional finance player that they have, massive resource and transaction volume, but, it's kind of a very typical innovator dilemma.
100% innovator's dilemma. And also the thing is, as big as the stablecoin numbers are today, let's say it's like 250 billion or so in stablecoins.
Yeah.
It's still, and even the revenue is big. I think I was looking up yesterday that like, I think JP Morgan's net revenue is like $180 billion, right? And so even if the stablecoin issuers have an interesting amount of income and everyone's looking at them saying, oh, it's a lot of income, it's still nothing compared to what a JP Morgan makes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's small enough that they will, tinker around it, but not take it seriously until it's like another 4 or 5 years. And suddenly it's very, very big. And suddenly it's like a problem, right?
Yes.
And usually
maybe that would be too late.
That's when it's too late. And this always happens with the innovator's dilemma, right?
Yes.
That's the same reason why I wrote a post about this a couple of days ago about KAST. Like we just hit 100 million in payments. It's tiny. We're something like 1/100,000th of Visa's platform, right? Global network of fees, which is nothing. People will ignore us for sure.
Yes.
But the way that these things work is you just need compound growth, like 10% month on month. You keep doing that for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and suddenly you're very, very big and someone's problems. But it's the way these things always happen.
Yeah. Come back to the customer segmentation. I found that your customer target is very unique as compared to the other crypto card issue I come across. Most of them they are targeting to serve the crypto players, crypto native players. But I feel like most of the crypto native players, they are financial savvy and they have their debit card and a credit card. They might nice to have a crypto card, but it's not that sort of urgent or super necessary for them. But you are targeting to the underserved population, which I guess most of them are not a crypto trader in a sense, right?
Yeah, so I think the way that most crypto companies, whether they're an exchange or a wallet, has looked at this is, I was talking to one the other day and they said, oh, we have $1 billion of stablecoins amongst our users, right? And some others, may have 10 billion of stablecoins on their wallet or exchange. So they think, okay, like you just add a card, it's very simple, then the users are going to start spending.
An easy cross-sell.
It's an easy cross-sell. But the thing is, to your exact point, until the whole experience becomes superior to what they have as their other options today,
yes,
they have no impetus to use it, right? Yes, they will use your platform for trading, but whether they will suddenly use your card, I have questions about, and we've seen other platforms, in fact, recently, like Bitso, for example, shut down their card. They just couldn't make it work. We're focused on making the whole experience better, right? We set it on Rails, so the authorization rate is extremely good. We're having global on and off ramps, so we'll be able to send money in and out in over 100+ countries within the next few months. And so in many ways, we're building what we call better than a bank. It's actually, you can have stablecoins, you can have cash, you can have payment links, you can have QR codes. The things that you couldn't get from your local bank will be a better experience than your bank or your neobank. And so because of that extreme focus, I think people will use us and are using us just simply because they think, okay, this is actually better than my bank. Just adding a card to an exchange or wallet, I don't think does the trick.
Yeah, because exchange users might not be the potential ideal target user for a crypto card, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's also a lot of people who have stablecoins who are stablecoin users as well. And also the other aspect, I think, is that there's increasingly people who are remote workers or freelancers. We see a lot of those sort of people as well, who are just using crypto as the rails effectively, but they're not like crypto people themselves.
No, but given that you are serving a lot of emerging market, can you introduce a little bit, how do you do the global market expansion?
Market expansion.
Yeah, do you like to do online, or like you have a very savvy, offline BD team, etc.?
No, so it's a combination of both. I think initially what we did was we had some really strong partnership. Well, we still have a very strong partnership with firms like Solana, for example, who really helped, been a great partner for us to promote us globally with their brand. And then we do a lot of partnership deals with other brands as well, and they help cross-promote our brand. And so now we've got a little bit of momentum, and we can see that in certain countries or certain regions, like, for example, Latin America and the Middle East and Asia, we've got a lot of uptake, right? And then from there, it's about, we work with people like KOLs and influencers who will talk about our product and use our product. And increasingly so, they, the more they talk about it, etc., then the more traction we get online. But it's majority online and through Twitter, through YouTube, and LinkedIn and other places. So I would say it's like 95% there, and some events at crypto conferences, but 95, probably like 98% is online.
Wow. Impressive. So how big is the size of the KAST right now? And which region is the top one customer from?
Yeah, so KAST as a company, we just processed 100 million in payments. We should do the next. That's just pure card payments.
Pure card,
We
okay.
make more. We have a lot more now coming with like on and off, what we call on and off ramp, or like moving cash in and out of the platform.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of people use us for swapping stablecoins as well. And we have more and more other things like product savings coming. We have a self-custodial wallet coming, so you can do investments like high yield investments, etc. But yeah, we're 100 million now. We think we'll do the next
100 million, I guess most of them are for daily consumption, grocery.
daily consumption
Okay.
payments.
So
yeah.
that's a real use case.
Exactly. Yeah, but we'll do the next 100 million, I think, in 3 months, and I think within 6 months we should be able to do 100 million a month. And
Wow.
so it's growing pretty fast right now. And I think the brand is strengthening. We put a lot of effort into making sure people trust our brand. We have a concierge service. We have this, vision of like making sure every customer's issue gets fixed, which is kind of rare in crypto. People have bad experiences with the exchanges and others unable to get a hold of customer service, can't they get their issue fixed. I personally will look at some customer issues when they get big enough.
Oh, wow.
So we keep this very, very like customer orientated view. Anyway, to answer your question, we are now around about 55 employees or so. And then we have another sort of 30 or 40 in our contract customer for compliance and customer support, etc. A lot of the 55 are engineering and product. And then of course we have, being a regulated business, legal and regulatory and business development, etc.
A lot of every digital solution, they replace some traditional alternative, like a CRM software replace Excel, right? For the team to manage the leads. What is the traditional competitor you are replacing? Is it cash or prepaid card?
So it depends a little bit, but yeah, it's some other type of financial. It depends on which country, and which user. But if in some cases, it's replacing their bank. What we really want to go down the path is like people debanking themselves.
Oh, debanking. Okay, so not only serve the unbanking population,
Yeah,
but also debanking some banking population.
yeah. I mean, well, a lot of people are getting debanked.
Okay.
For various reasons. Or the bank is I don't think like there's going to be a small population which is like completely debanking themselves.
Yeah.
I think the majority are just using banks less. I saw this one Twitter post the other day about someone who said that they've been using KAST for like 6 months now, and then their bank called them and said, "Hey, like, what's the problem? Like, you haven't used us. Why are you not using us anymore?"
Yeah.
And that's because they've been using our platform, right?
Yeah. So slowly they debank themselves.
Yeah, slowly they debank themselves because stablecoins provide more global flexibility. You can send stablecoins to people anywhere, and so if they live like a global first life, either that they're working remotely for someone in some other part of the world, or they're working online or on chain, then yes, I think we would become a better alternative to their current bank or financial institution.
And you also mentioned, I think one of your interview also mentioned the WhatsApp methodology.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you, what is that, and how do you approach this in the KAST journey?
Yeah, so the WhatsApp product methodology, just for those who don't know, if you use WhatsApp, it's extremely simple product, right?
Yes.
And effectively, I've been using WhatsApp for maybe 13 or 14 years, and it hasn't changed, right? So you and I looks, pretty much identical to what we saw 13 years ago, right? What actually the beauty of what WhatsApp did was, instead of changing the basic necessity of like messaging, what they did was they were supported on like 100+ different phones. I'm talking about, when they were launched, right?
Yes.
And so even if you had like a 2G phone in Africa, or you had the latest iPhone, you could communicate with each other and you would have almost the same experience. I think they're famous for the double tick when the message is delivered. I remember when I used to fly, when I land, like WhatsApp would always be the first one to connect and be able to like deliver messages, right? And so what it is that the user feels a very simple experience, right? And that's what we're trying to deliver. But in the back end, what work you have to do is very complex, because WhatsApp has to like support 100 different, or now probably hundreds of different phone types, and make it all seamless, no matter who you are, what phone you have, what network you're connected to. It feels very, very, they have to do a lot of work to support all that, but to the user, it's very simple. So we're doing a very similar thing. The base product of like cash savings card is extremely simple, right? And being able to send money in and out is very simple. But the background work of being able to support users in nearly any country, or the regulatory you have to do, all the work you have to do with the tech and all the different phones you support, and then also being able to move money out of like lots of different countries. Like we'll support 100+ countries to move money in and out of. That's really hard. The hardcore plumbing is in that. And we'll spend probably the next 10 years making that better and better and better. Over time, that becomes our moat, because others are not spending, creating a very simple product. But that, I see a lot of cards being launched, but, they only support the EU, or they only support America, right? And so it's our focus on all of the complexity, but making it available to people nearly anywhere and very, very simple. That's the methodology.
So what's that methodology from your references? Like they make all the cell phone infrastructure neutral, and basically makes their core function very seamless, regardless, what kind of a cell phone you're using, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that one, getting to the cost is regardless where is the customer, which jurisdiction they are, etc. But their experience with KAST would be very seamless.
Exactly. And we take care of the complexity of making it available in 150 countries and all the other pieces that come together for it.
Yeah. And I think, that's exactly where the traditional finance regime, create the friction is, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, they make, the transaction, between different jurisdictions very, a big headache.
Yes, exactly. And the experience is different, it's sort of like, I think we've all experienced financial services where depending on where you are, you'll get something available, not available, what passport you have, etc. Right? I think and this really fits to the true nature of crypto, right? Because crypto at its heart was meant to be fair and open for anyone, right? In between, I think crypto got distracted doing a lot of trading, but really at its core, crypto, I think believes that money should be open and free and fair.
Yeah.
And we're trying to build that in an experience for people that they can use every day in their lives.
I think there are 3 layers when we talk about the stablecoin and related business. In the very bottom, it's sort of a layer 1, Tron, Solana, Ethereum, etc. In the middle, it's a stablecoin issuer. And on the top is, which application you're using, right, to interact with each other. I guess you're doing on the top, but also like, synchronize all the infrastructure.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I have another side question is, what do you think of the stablecoin landscape and the infrastructure? Do you think, right now is the landscape, won't be able to change in the next few years? In the infrastructure, there's the Ethereum, Solana, Tron, those are the big 3. And the stablecoin is USDT and USDC. Do you think you will cope with them in the next few years, or you might cope with some new challenger?
So we announced that we're launching our stablecoin USDK.
Okay, first of all, you will be the new player of the coin issuer, right?
Yeah, it's not. So I caution, and eventually we may even have our own chain, right?
Okay.
But I caution it in this way. A lot of people are trying to become issuers. A lot of people are trying to build blockchains. Right?
Yes.
But we are not going to do that for the purposes of just
to do it. Yeah.
Doing it. Our view is that it's user first, right?
Yeah.
So it's only where we find problems in the stablecoin issuance or at the chain level that we need to fix to make the experience better for a user. For example, in the stablecoin issuance level, there's too many stablecoins today and too many chains.
Yes.
If you have USDT on Tron, you want to go to USDC on Solana, like the user doesn't care really, right? They
Yeah.
just want dollars.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that happens that someone may send them money USDT on Tron, and they may have to send it to someone else on Solana, right? With another stablecoin. And so what our stablecoin is actually, will be working with our wallet infrastructure and our whole protocol. So you can deposit any stablecoin, any chain, and take out any stablecoin, any chain. It's just in the middle, it's held as ours, and a little bit of the revenue that we make from the interest, etc., effectively pays to remove all that complexity, all the gas fees, all the bridging, swapping, all of that effectively gets taken care of by the fees that we collect from it, right? And so we're fixing a customer problem, not just trying to issue a stablecoin for the sake of it, right? In the future, when we go to the chain level, one of the issues that stablecoins have is that stablecoins, from a payments level, are actually pretty dumb, right? What I mean by that is that most people don't realize how smart Visa and MasterCard networks are underneath, right? Versus in a stablecoin, you just say, "Hey, Bill, what's your wallet address?" And then I'll send you a stablecoin, and it's like more like a debit card transaction, right? It's a one-to-one, right? There's no smarts in there. Versus if you do a credit card transaction, for example, I got an Uber over here. The Uber would take like a pre-authorization of a certain amount of money. Let's say it's like $40, and then the car ride might have become $33, and then they'll return $7, right? Because they know that you're good for the money, you're good for $40, even if the car ride is $40, or whether it's $25, you're good for the money. And you can't do that in stablecoins today. There's no concept of like a pre-authorization, return of funds.
Yes.
There's no concept, there's very little concept of like permission in certain scenarios. For example, if you're a merchant and you only want to accept money from certain people for regulatory reasons, it's hard to do that. There's other issues such as like refunds, etc. And so there's many scenarios for which stablecoin payments as a layer are not very smart. And we think by having a lot of users, like we got a few 100,000 users today, but let's say one day we have 10 million or 100 million users, right? We think at that point we can see that the users will have other requirements, and we can build for those requirements. So they can do a reversal, and they can do all the smarts that they can do on a Visa or MasterCard, but on-chain, purely on-chain.
Do you think right now the general layer one, they cannot fulfill those type of demands?
I think they can. And so whether it becomes whether we build our own chain or whether it becomes some sort of like smart contract layer, that's to be debated.
Yeah.
And so we, like I always say, we're not in the business of like building a chain for the sake of it. Like I think many people are, because obviously they think, oh, the token's going to do whatever it's going to do. It's a very
because of the FDV, fully diluted valuation.
Yeah. I think most people are launching chains, and the first thing they think about is FDV.
Yes.
And the second thing they think about is, okay, what are we going to do on this chain, right? And so that is like 99% of chains.
Yes.
But for us, it's like, okay, what customer problem can we solve based upon the usage that we're seeing?
Yeah.
And if that means that we have to launch a chain, okay, we will do it.
Yeah.
But if we can build on top of a chain, ideally like Solana, then we'll do it as well.
Yeah. And also, if we take reference of the Web2 evolvement, there are a lot of very successful over-the-top application layer who in the end get into the infrastructure, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like Amazon is an e-commerce application layer.
Yeah.
But in the end, they get into the infra to become
exactly.
AWS.
And they make more money from AWS today than they make from
Yes.
the other layer, right? So it's a natural extension that I think will happen over time. And also, by the way, if you do it the other way, like I've seen the launch of chains, I've seen the launch of different stable coins, because they don't own the end customer. The problem that they have is that firstly they can be swapped out. If you own the end customer, like you can pretty much dictate what happens underneath, right? But the second thing is like, you're not really learning use cases, right? We're learning so much just from what we see with customers.
Yes.
And every day in terms of like, And so I think the customer first approach will win at the end of the day. It'll take longer because it's easier to launch a chain and a token and have all this cash and try to build use cases. But I think over time, owning the customer, doing the hard work of acquiring the customer is the better route.
Yeah. I read an article saying, most of the global telecom company in different jurisdiction, their all-time high market cap is around 2007.
Right.
And after 2007, because of the over-the-top application began to dominate, right?
Yeah.
Apple, WeChat, WhatsApp, etc.
Yeah.
And those application companies, their market cap began to go beyond as compared to the telecom company.
Exactly. That's actually a very good analogy, and I'm gonna reuse that if you don't mind, Phil, because it's it's exactly like I think like the internet was roughly came to being in 1995, right? And so. And if you think about crypto, like Ethereum is really what, 2015, 2016, something like that. And so if you look at that period, it was like 12 years from the beginning of the internet to when telcos peaked, with data. We're probably reaching that period in the next sort of 3 to 5 years when the infrastructure side will peak and then applications will start taking over. Maybe not 3 to 5, maybe it'll take a little longer, but I think we're entering the application age of crypto.
Come back to the KAST. How do you envision KAST in next, I think 5 years is too long for our industry. Let's say 24 months, 36 months.
Actually, Bill, I have a 25-year plan for KAST.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you go to another offset. When everyone makes short-term plan, you have a super
I have
long...
a 25-year plan.
Okay.
Yeah. I initially wrote a 10-year plan for KAST, and then I've extended it into like a 25-year plan. And so the way that I see it happening is that stablecoin growth is now broken away from just crypto trading. And so it's just, at the moment, we're like 1% of all money supply, like M2 money supply, right?
Yeah.
And so that will probably go 3 or 4x and become like $1 trillion of stablecoins by, let's say, within the next 36 months, right? What that means is that there'll be so many more people with stablecoins who will go, hey, I need a banking style application for my stablecoins, right? And so we're growing on the back of that. And I think that will mean that, if I project it out, I think we'll be somewhere in the order of like 20 to 50 times bigger than we are today. And maybe 100x if I'm lucky over the next 36 months. But just to give you the quick snapshot of the way that I see the next 25 years happening, I think by 2030, we're going to see a scenario where we have maybe like $2 trillion of stablecoins.
10x.
10x from 8x from today.
Okay.
I think will happen over the next 5 years, right? And so suddenly you will have 7 or 8% of all money being stablecoins, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens then is like today, if only 1% have stablecoins, most of the time when someone gives you stablecoins, you want to off ramp it, right? Because you don't have that many people to send it to, right? When it's 7 or 8%, suddenly a lot of people have stablecoins. So the stablecoins start having their own ecosystem where people are not taking from normal cash into stablecoins. They're mostly keeping in stablecoins because they know they can send it to someone and they're like, oh, this is as good as dollars. I don't need to off ramp it. I think if you track that forward to 2040, you're going to be in a position where stablecoins will be maybe 10 trillion or more, right? It'll be somewhere between 20 to 40% of all money will be in stablecoins, right? And then it becomes very significant, right? Because then nearly half of all dollars at least will become stablecoins. It moves very freely in the world. And it's very good for KAST because imagine the way that I think about it is like US money supply is like 22, 23 trillion. If stablecoins are going to become like in the next 15 years, half of that amount, then imagine you had an economy half the size of the US economy with no banks, right? And so I think the opportunity to build a bank for a new emerging economy that's half the size of the US is just incredibly significant. You could literally build almost another JP Morgan on top of that. And that's why I think like what we're going to do is just going to be immensely big. Like I think we have the opportunity and players in this opportunity can become $100 billion plus companies, maybe even like $1 trillion companies because the opportunity is that big.
Yeah.
Now, I've only given you 15 years. You're going to ask me what happens at the 25-year mark. Stablecoins will continue, but they will be actually, for the Bitcoiners out there, it's quite interesting because by 2040, I think US dominance would have come down a little bit, and there'll be very significant Asian economies, including China and India, and emerging market economies, including Africa, would have come up quite a bit, right? And stablecoins, especially dollar stablecoins, will be incredibly dominant, right? But the question will be like, it's so dominant now, and the world is running on
The US dollar stablecoin, right?
yeah, well, US dollar stablecoins, but so much of the world, like I think most other currencies, minus the euro and very large ones like Japanese yen, etc., are going to get crushed in this process, right? There's going to be like maybe 10 major currencies, and the other 100+ currencies are essentially the ones that are already weak are basically going to become like all dollar linked, right?
Yeah.
So what I think happens in that last 2040 onwards period is that people will revisit whether they should have stablecoins that are just backed by US dollars, and maybe some economic thing will happen where US dollars will weaken too much, and people will start considering a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, right? And Bitcoin may be significant by then. It might be worth $50 trillion or something. Or maybe there'll be a gold and Bitcoin. There's already talk of like a gold-backed currency, you know? Maybe people will have some sort of currency mix of like gold and Bitcoin backed.
Yeah.
And there'll be a second stablecoin. So the biggest currencies in the world would be US dollar backed stablecoin and a stablecoin that's backed by some mix of like maybe Bitcoin and gold. And you know, most people who are currency geeks will know that there was once the gold standard of currencies were backed by gold. And I think there's going to be a future for that. And then there's going to be another wave of banking that happens for this new economy that's built on top of like a new currency.
Yes.
And I think that's what's going to happen from 2040 to 2050, and we have to prepare for it. I actually have wrote a separate paper on this thing called the bull dollar, which is effectively a mix between the euro, the dollars, gold and Bitcoin as a currency. It's a blended currency of the mix of the four, which is doesn't depreciate like the currencies, but also doesn't have the volatility of gold and Bitcoin rather.
Yeah.
And actually, I think the perfect currency is a mix of the four.
Do you think in the last 15 years, not only the methodology store of the value, you know, the asset to back, but also, you know, how we can do the methodology of the accounting, you know, as a US dollar stablecoin, or it's going to be a BTC stablecoin, like both the backup asset and the sort of accounting methodology will change along the way, both.
Yeah, exactly. You know, because at the moment, Bitcoin is volatile, but in 15 years, like we can see already Bitcoin's not going up that much and down comparatively.
Yeah.
So I think much like gold, would become very stable, you know? And so, yeah, and then people will go, okay, like, yeah, we'll accept. I think everything is going to have to change. Accounting will definitely have to change.
Yeah.
But people will say, hey, look, like currencies. I think in that 2040 period, people go, are currencies really that good? Like dollar backed, euro backed, these economies are shaky. They're not the major economy anymore. There's big economies out there.
Yeah.
Should we have something else?
Yeah.
And I think it'll be hard. I think it'll be hard for example, China to become dominant because India will also be trying to be dominant.
Yeah.
And so I think they'll find commonality in gold and Bitcoin. Yeah. I know the Bitcoiners want me to say just Bitcoin, but I'm actually still very bullish on gold as well.
And also, I think we need to, you know, sort of take count in of some sort of a momentum from the history. I read an article from Ray Dalio saying, you know, even as late as 1960, you know, that is like, you know, 15 years later, after the Bretton Woods system, you know, gold-backed US dollar has become the reserve currency, right?
Yeah.
But in 1960, still, you know, more than 50% of the global international trade is done by pounds, British pound. Yeah, because it's just a momentum.
Yes.
You know, yeah, so people just, you know, kind of too lazy to change the currency. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we forget that. For that reason, I think the dollar is going to become more and more dominant, but then the new wave will happen, very much similar to the pound got replaced by the dollar.
Yeah.
I think the new wave will happen, but the new wave will be this gold and Bitcoin backed currency, which is global.
My last question would be, you're doing a global business, and I know originally your family from Sri Lanka, but you spend a lot of time in all different regions, right?
Yeah.
So what is your key take on this? And what would be your advice to the young generation who want to get into the tech industry or in general?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got like a couple of minutes, I can explain like my history. Like I was born in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, like 3 years after I was born, they had a civil war that started. It went on for 26 years. And I think 3 years after the war started, my family migrated to Australia because of it was just the conditions weren't good. And so that's what took me to Australia, right? But we came with nothing, to Australia. And my dad had a shop. He had a very simple life. I grew up in Adelaide, which is like a city in Australia. Like in Adelaide, they do a lot of mining, but there's no concept of banking or tech or anything when I was growing up, And so I think, so when I was very young, when I was 20, I first went to the US and then the UK, and then subsequently I lived in Nigeria, and I even lived in Abu Dhabi for a bit, and then now I lived in Singapore for a long time, right? And so I've traveled to like 100+ countries in the world. And so my advice to young people is that you have to go and explore the world, because the opportunities are only as big as the place in which you're living, right? And in my case, like, I think like the internet is great. It does make the world a bit more level, but you still have to venture and go to places to really maximize your opportunities.
Okay.
I think places
So offline experience is very important.
Yes, exactly. I think people think you can just build online, and I think that's the beauty of the internet. It's made the world easier. If I had growing up in Sri Lanka, my opportunities would be very different to growing up in Australia.
Yes.
But also being in Australia, the opportunities there are different to being in places like Singapore, the UAE, which are like very much hubs, or New York, right? And so even though you can offline connect with people, and people are influencing stuff from anywhere in the world, it's the beauty of the internet. Eventually, I think you've got to go to a place where the best minds exist, and the best capital exists, and the best opportunities exist, And so my advice to young people is that you have to take that brave step of moving somewhere where there's an energy.
Yeah.
I think the UAE does a great job of this, and Singapore's done a great job of it.
Yeah.
And I think, in the past, still London and New York and other places do that.
You're a big fan of super city. You recommend the young generation, instead of staying in a
still
suburban area?
I'm a big fan of super city. I've written about it before, saying don't kid yourself. Go to a big city. That's where you're gonna. Cities work for reasons of just having people with a lot of energy and a lot of different backgrounds in the same place, See, online, you're going to find people that are similar to you. But the beauty is that you learn from people that are different. You live in a dynamic city, and you may be in tech, but you'll meet people who are in art, and then you'll meet people, and these things give you ideas, and these ideas will come together one day when you're trying to build a business like we are. For example, like, even though we're a tech platform, we spend a lot of time on our brand and design, which is kind of more art than it is tech, and I wouldn't have that experience, without living in a city, I think there's a famous saying that you don't sell products, you sell status. And it's true, because people want to feel special, and, they want to feel like the status of having a product is really, really almost more important than the product itself in some ways. But these are things you won't understand unless you live in a city, where people are crunched together and they have to learn off each other.
Go to the super city. That will be the first one.
Yes.
Any other advice?
Just be brave.
Be brave.
Be brave and get out there. The opportunity is not going to come to you. You have to go and find it.
What is the biggest brave move in your past career?
I think, the bravest moves you make usually are when you're very young, right? And so I think the first thing was just, I talk about it now, but I was very shy to talk about it. But before I finished my degree, and I was like 3rd year into my degree, I just dropped out and went straight to America to go and learn tech as a peak of the .com boom.
Oh, wow.
Because I was just like, I was so frustrated with like the lack of opportunity. And so my father supported it, and I came back and studied after that. But like, my father supported it because he knew that I was just hungry to go and find more opportunity. And it wasn't going to happen in Adelaide, Australia. It's a too small a city, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to make brave, unconventional steps that other people will think you're a little bit crazy to do. Similarly, a few years later, I got an opportunity to go and work in Nigeria, where I lived for 2 years. Once again, people thought, are you crazy? Like, you're like 22, 23 years old. Why are you going to work in Nigeria? But I learned, I think, more in those 2 years in Nigeria than possibly I learned anywhere else, right? Because if you grow up sorry?
How so?
It's just that because like we were there at the beginning of when they were building mobile phone telephony. You know, Nigeria had at that time 140 million people. By the way, now they have 240 million people. And they only had like 500,000 telephone lines. And so you're seeing infrastructure being built from the ground up. You know, they had to go and build literally mobile phone towers, but they didn't have enough electricity for them. So you had to buy generators and all this infrastructure. And they needed people, right? And so it was an opportunity to see infrastructure being built and how useful it was. And that carries with me till today, the lessons I learned around building infrastructure and why it can be useful for people and why there's lots of people who are just desperate. Because if you come from a modern country, you think things will work for everyone. It's only if you go and live in like very much the opposite scenario that you realize that actually a lot of people are desperate for products and things just to make their everyday life work. Yeah.
Sounds like you also get some inspiration to launch the KAST by the Nigeria experience.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
You stay in the super city, but you understand what does the underserved market look like.
Exactly. So I've lived in a mix of global super cities, but also I think it's going and living and working in emerging market is really can shape your worldview of like what the opportunity looks like.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll build an experience that's just useful for like, you know, people in developed countries, which already have lots of opportunities and products already.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. I think, you know, go to the super city and take a bold move. Yeah. Thank you for the advice to the young generation. And to
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Bill. It's been great. And hopefully it's useful for everyone.
Yeah, we really enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, that's all for today on Build It Up. We'll be back next week with another inspiring guest. Subscribe now so you will never miss our amazing interviews. Until next time, this is Bill Chen. Goodbye and take care.